So thank you all so much for this opportunity today. I have to say I was looking at the list of speakers and distinguished guests and people in the room that I have so much respect and admiration for that I was having quite a bit of imposter syndrome about this speech. And so I went to one of my favorite literary characters as a kid to get some advice. But I thought that Hermione in this case had it a little bit off, and that in my situation I might need to change it to, we could be killed or worse, be asked to do public speaking. In all seriousness, thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Adam Miller, and I am the co-founder and executive director of Planet Indonesia. So I'm just going to dive right in with some background about our organization. And we know today that globally, research shows us that 80% of the world's biodiversity and 30% of the world's remaining carbon is found in the territories, lands, forests, and oceans that are inhabited by indigenous people. Yet, these communities, as we all know, represent the most oppressed, marginalized, and discriminated against groups on the planet. However, we will not solve the global biodiversity crisis, the global climate crisis, without proper ways of engaging and partnering with indigenous people. And so, the crazy thing is the world offers this amazing but severely underinvested in opportunity. And it's already been talked about today. It's co-designing solutions together with people on the ground. And so co-designing solutions with communities, for us, we believe it's the most cost-effective and impactful tool that we have. So in 2013, myself and 3 close Indonesian friends set out to build an organization to really shift the needle on these global problems. And we started out by doing a lot of what you see in this picture. Sitting around with communities, listening to the stories and the challenges that they were facing and the solutions they had to those problems. And so what we did, we went to montane communities, we spoke with smallholder farmers, we spoke with poachers, miners, illegal loggers, small-scale fishers. And what we learned is whether we were in the mountains of Borneo to the coastal islands of Indonesia, that people kind of had the same solutions to these problems. Communities asked us that in order to adequately protect nature, to protect animals and wildlife, they needed 4 main things: secured rights over their ancestral territories, systems to manage and protect these ecosystems, good governance systems for sovereignty, and simple ways to make a viable living off of the land. And so it became very clear to us, myself and the founding team, that we needed replicable and scalable models that worked to identify challenges in an inclusive way at a local level, and turning those challenges hand in hand with communities into a positive vision for the future. And so we built our organization, Planet Indonesia, to do just that. And so just to start to explain a little bit about what we do, we really do 4 core things to amplify community-determined solutions to global problems. And so first, we partner with communities to help them navigate the legal battle to secure tenure and rights over ocean, over forests, over agricultural lands in Indonesia. Second, we then support communities to set up natural resource management plans, really focusing on creating core no-take zones to create these safe havens for wildlife and nature, sustainable use zones, and supporting every community to set up a smart patrol unit so that they can patrol and protect their land. We then strengthen local governance institutions. These are institutions that are run for, by, and with local communities, and our job is to strengthen them and help make their vision become a reality. And then finally, throughout this entire process, we integrate savings and loans groups, microgrants. We do a lot of work around voluntary family planning, making sure that communities have access to the equitable and inclusive social and economic services to help them overcome the hardships of rural poverty. And so we've really built this core model. And these 4 aspects, we really hope help communities get back behind the wheel in controlling their future. And by putting people at the center of conservation, animals, nature, and communities can thrive together. So for those that know me, I'm a little bit of a data junkie. So I'm gonna dive into several graphs here on evaluations of this approach. So in 2021, we conducted Well, you can't see the x-axis, so I'll explain it. We conducted a deforestation analysis over 2 large landscapes from 2000 to 2020 to 21. And we wanted to look at deforestation rates in village boundaries before and after we partnered with a community. And on the y-axis, that's percent forest loss per year. And this still blows my mind, that after we partner with communities, that communities are almost eradicating deforestation in their village areas. But we wanted to make sure that this wasn't just happening by chance. So we looked at villages in these large landscapes, over 300,000 hectares of protected areas and community-managed areas, and found that in areas that where we were not working control sites, that deforestation had remained relatively the same over a 2021 period. This graph's a little bit overwhelming, but in 2020 is when the pandemic started, right? Yeah. 2020, we partnered with Stanford University, and we wanted to look at, does this holistic approach of working with communities, does it create buffers that when communities experience big shocks, like COVID-19, that social economic resilience can lead to reduced levels of deforestation? So we partnered with Stanford, and we created a new AI tool to calculate deforestation at a very minute level on every single village on this island of Borneo at every single week for 3 years before the pandemic and through the entire pandemic. And so panel A here is a modeling exercise. And basically what I want you to take away is negative covariates are negatively influencing deforestation rates, and positive covariates are positively influencing them. So NGO affiliation, that means partnering with us, negatively influences it. Travel restrictions, interestingly, when borders shut down, that actually had a big negative impact on deforestation rates. Also things like slope, makes sense, it's hard to illegally log and clear land in the high mountains. But what was positively influencing deforestation? COVID-19 deaths, is there a laser? Ah, there we go. COVID-19 deaths, also the timber index. Panel B, we did a similar analysis to the previous one. We looked at deforestation before and after the pandemic declaration. Red is villages that we are not working with, and you can see that deforestation remained relatively the same. Blue is communities that we are partnered with, and you can see that deforestation actually went down during the pandemic. And then finally, this one's really interesting. We wanted to look at, as the world began to reopen and the price of timber went up, supply chains became active again, what that did in control and treatment sites when it comes to deforestation. And basically, as the world opened up, deforestation shot up in villages that were not partnered with us, versus in partnership sites, village deforestation continued to be decreasing. Another thing that we've done is by using Smart Patrol data in community-managed areas, looking at 3 types of illegal activities and the encounter rates of those. An encounter rate means detection per kilometer patrolled. So we've done this for, on average, communities we support walk about 3,800 kilometers every single year, patrolling forests in Borneo. And we've looked at that data across a 5-year period. And we found that in these community-managed areas, illegal poaching detections, these are things like snares, camps, have been reduced by 80%. Illegal logging detections have been reduced by 70%. And illegal land clearing have been reduced by 66%. And these are some of the statistical analysis that we've published about that. Another data set. We've also been really interested in how can this approach positively or negatively impact biodiversity. And so in one of our project sites, we've set up over 50 kilometers of transects that we monitor in the wet and dry season. And this is just a subset of the data. But, oops. We looked at over a 4-year period some of the world's most rarest species, like the Abbott's gibbon, which is an endemic species to Sarawak in West Kalimantan, greater green leaf bird, the critically endangered helmeted hornbill, whose casque is worth 5 times the price of elephant ivory on Asian black markets, rhinoceros hornbill, white rump shama, which is being decimated by the Indonesian songbird trade. And what we found really blew our minds, which is that these species aren't just declining more slowly, They're often increasing in these community-managed areas. The final analysis, and then I'll stop showing you guys graphs. We partnered with the Woodhull Climate Institute to look at carbon sequestration rates. And basically, this is a graph of 180,000 hectare ecosystem that we work in from 2003 to 2014. Green is carbon gain, so the amount of carbon being sucked out of the atmosphere by the forest and sequestered. And then red is carbon loss, so the amount of carbon that's being lost from activities like illegal deforestation, land clearing, logging, et cetera. And then blue is basically gain minus red, so the net. So you can see that in 2003 to 2014 that this ecosystem is starting to move in the wrong direction. It is releasing more carbon into the atmosphere than it is sequestering. But in 2015, something good seems to happen. It moves to neutral. And that good thing continues to happen all the way up until 2020-22, when we last have had this data. And that period, 2015 to 2020-22, that's exactly within 6 months of when we began partnering with communities in this reserve. And so this really shows these different data sets, the power of putting people at the center of conservation, and how when we really co-design and collaborate with the most important stakeholders, which a lot of times have goals and visions that are in conflict with what we have, but really sitting down and co-designing can create these amazing, amazing benefits for our planet and wildlife. But halfway through that journey, we realized that we were seeing this great movement happening on the ground, but there was these outside forces. There was groups of traveling illegal loggers, groups of organized crime, government corruption, and things that were outside of the ecosystem level that were putting negative impacts on communities, nature, and animals. And so in 2016, we launched the Wak-Gatak Conservation Center, and this is the XC2 branch of our organization. In the Wak-Gatak Conservation Center, we have 4 main programs. We've built Indonesia's first rescue center that is wholly dedicated to rescuing Indonesian songbirds. We have a behavior change campaign team that's really focused on a number of issues, but right now is creating behavior change campaigns together with religious leaders to reduce the frequency and participation rates in Indonesian songbird competitions, which are extremely cruel. Third, we have a trade monitoring team that looks to uncover illicit supply chains, looking at everything from timber to illegal wildlife trade. Where is it going and how is it moving? And then finally, we have a legal team in this center. This legal team puts pressure on state prosecutors and judges to make sure that when these cases go to court in Indonesia, the bad guys don't get off easy. And so we've really tried to embrace these kind of 2 pathways of change. Our XC2 team really focuses on partnering with the Indonesian government, addressing these external forces around illegal wildlife trade, environmental crime, and animal cruelty. And while our NC2 teams are really focused on partnering with communities and co-designing solutions that have benefits for people, nature, and planet. So where are we going with this? Over the next 4 years, we plan to deepen and expand our impact in West Kalimantan, and really looking at now scaling through partnerships and growing the kind of vibrant civil society ecosystem in Indonesia. By 2026, we plan to expand this approach to 1.25 million hectares. We'll do that by partnering with 65,000 families in Indonesia. But I like to say that steps really became strides for us in 2021. And that's when we began partnering with like-minded organizations across Indonesia. We identify small civil society organizations and provide them with a package of technical support, finance, and organizational development to help other organizations be better at what they already do. And so what started as a movement in 2013, or rather as an idea in 2013 in West Kalimantan, has grown into a replicable approach and is now becoming a movement with new sites identified across the Indonesian archipelago where we can apply this approach. And so if I could really strip it all down, At Planet Indonesia, there's 4 words that are really key to what we do. And that's thriving people and thriving places. And I really like the words that we've heard today because what binds those 2 things together is kindness. Thriving people isn't about just being wealthy or making more money. It's about people's hopes and autonomy in the future. Thriving places isn't just about reducing deforestation. It's about bringing wildlife back to places. It's about acknowledging and respecting the services of clean water, clean air that these places provide us as a human society. So just in my final part of the presentation, kind of in line with the title of my presentation, I'd like to just share some lessons learned from starting almost 10 years ago as a team of 3, now as a team of over 250 staff, again working in an area that's 5 times the size of the largest national park in the United States. And so here are just some key lessons learned. One is to start by listening. And again, I think listening is underpinned by kindness. We've learned so much by listening to people that often we think are from the outside, have a different opinion or a different set of values from us. But by really listening and co-designing together, you often find there's a lot of things that binds us together. The next is partnerships are key. Sometimes people ask us, this holistic approach where you guys are integrating family planning and livelihoods and all of this, it's such a big lift. And actually, we're able to do all of that through partnerships. We have 1 staff member in our community health program that's able to get health services to over 30,000 women. And we do that by partnering with the Indonesian government and just making sure that their traveling clinics that provide free medicine, free voluntary family planning counseling reach the villages that we work in. So cross-sectoral partnerships, conservation, welfare organizations, partnering with health and education organizations, it's the only way that we're going to be able to solve these massive global problems. The next, this was a big thing that really helped Planet Indonesia that we did a few years ago. And there's been such a boom in work around behavior change, and particularly around campaigns, and I'm sure we're going to hear a lot about it this week. And I think all of it is super useful. But one thing that someone did for us, I think in about the 3rd year as an organization, is they asked us to just really think about who has to do what differently in the world for your guys' vision to become a reality. And so they asked us to just make this really simple behavior map, that someone has to do something, and then they have to do something, and then they have to do something, and then your mission can be realized. And let's say your mission is eradicate rabies in Bali, or reduce dog meat consumption in Cambodia, or stop tropical deforestation. People have to do things differently for that vision and mission to become a reality. And then what you can do is map onto that what your organization needs to do. And this was really, really powerful for us because we found 2 main things. One, that there was things that we were doing as an organization that didn't show up in the blue. And this was hard because we had to make organizational decisions, things that we loved, ideas and programs that were really important to us, but logically they weren't the biggest bang for our buck in contributing to our mission. The second thing is we identified things that were missing here. For example, that whole XC2 division, that came out of doing this exercise. We realized that we needed people outside of communities to do things differently, and by mapping their behavior, we needed to create a division of our organization that worked with the court system, that worked with the police. And so I encourage people to think about behavior change, not just in a campaign, but to reach your mission, who has to do what differently, and then what does your organization need to do to influence that behavior. Finally, measure, measure, measure. I think demonstrating impact is really important, and for Planet Indonesia and myself, we really think about it in 2 schools of thought. One is, if someone's giving us $1 or $1 million, it is our job, it is our responsibility to be able to explain to them in numbers what that impact can be generated. I believe that is our duty as nonprofits in whatever space you're working in. And the second is, and I think this is much more important, measuring and demonstrating impact, it ultimately helps me make the decision whether this is worth killing myself over. We struggle. I know how much we all struggle with burnout, with exhaustion. The problems are only getting bigger and more widespread. But when we can measure our impact and understand if this is working, even if it's just at a village level or a landscape level or one province, that can help us overcome that burnout. To me, that tells us, yes, we should keep going. The next thing that we've learned, and this has been really hard for us, is are we measuring the right thing? A lot of times as you probably saw from all that data, we measure way too much. And so now we're really trying to rein it in and think about what are the most impactful indicators that really tell us if our work is working. Finally, two more. One is, let's not lose more slowly. And I think this one is really challenging. And to explain this better, a few weeks ago I was at a fellowship program in San Francisco, and the fellowship program kind of has these two groups, and one is more development focused, so these health organizations, education groups, and the other is a mixture of climate conservation and welfare groups. And what we noticed is that all the development groups had these really ambitious missions. Eradicate malaria in Cameroon. Stop gender-based violence in India. Eradicate rural poverty in China. And all the environmental groups had this reduce deforestation, slow the negative impacts of illegal wildlife trade. And someone pointed out, and they said, why are all the environmentalists okay with losing more slowly? And that was a really hard and kind of a not nice question to ask. But I think it's something we need to think about as a community. I realize the problems we're facing are gargantuan in size, and they're systemic. But I do believe that we maybe do need to be more ambitious. Maybe it isn't reducing the negative impacts of coral reef trade in Indonesia, but it's eradicating it. Let's shoot for the stars and then measure and figure out if we're getting there. And finally, I really do believe we have one chance at kind of getting this right as our planet reaches this tipping point. And I think one of the biggest lessons learned for us is that this really does hinge upon diversity and inclusion. And I think it's probably good to address the elephant in the room today, which is why am I, this Midwestern American white guy, talking about indigenous rights in Southeast Asia. And I first moved to Indonesia in 2013 to study birds. I wanted to become an ornithologist, I wanted to go into academia, and I was studying birds in this national park, counting things as trees were being cut down and rifles were going off. And I was living with an indigenous community, and I remember one night I went home to a family I was staying with, Pat Jewel, and I was in the kitchen with his wife, and I was helping her cook rice and daun umbi tubuk, which is one of my favorites. And I asked her, I just said casually, Bu Jewel, I said, what does conservation mean to you? And she just said to me, oh, it means being prohibited to do things by white people. I went home that evening, I cried. I hung out my binoculars. I decided to no longer pursue ornithology and to really become a reluctant social entrepreneur. And I believe that we really need to address some of these dark colonial histories that are tied with conservation and the environmental movement. We need to address the issue that a lot of these environmental movements are developed and funded in the global north and then dropped on people in the global south. And I realize it's not easy, and this is maybe becoming overused, but I think that we really have to address this. We need more diversity in all of these spaces. We need better inclusion. We need models that don't just not include everyone, but that do include everyone. And sometimes we're actively excluding people in this work. And so I just wanted to end with that kind of major lesson that we have learned at Planet Indonesia and is really key to our work. And so I think there should be a video. Oh, well. Okay, well, that's very anticlimactic. There was a video, a minute and a half there, but I'll just wrap up by saying thank you all so much for this opportunity. Please do come up and talk to myself, or Agung and Dr. Happy, will you please stand up? Oh, Agung has run to the bathroom. Those are two members of our team. That's how much you know we have kindness at Planet Indonesia, because our heads vet his name is Dr. Happy. But please come up and talk to us. Thank you again so much for this opportunity.